Dominic Remane, you recently scored your second consecutive Emmy nomination for your visual effects work on Vikings. So what's it like to get this kind of recognition?
It's an absolute honor. I can't even put into words of how great it is to be nominated twice in a row for the show that we all love working on.
Okay, and earlier this year you also won a Canadian Screen Award. So did you get to make a speech?
Yeah, it was a surprise that we actually won that. We weren't expecting to, and yeah, we made a speech, and we were all nerve-wracked up on stage, and yeah.
So the episode attached to your nomination this year is the second one from the season. It's titled Invasion, and it's the one that features a 4-year time jump. So why did you choose to submit this episode?
I think primarily this episode was one of the strongest that we did because it featured not only a large storm sequence that we had, but it also featured Kattegat, the main town, the fjord extensions that we do on a daily basis, and then just the standard battles that we do. It was an all-around good episode to put in. It wasn't concentrated on one specific thing.
What would you say is your favorite part of Vikings, or the most challenging?
I'd have to, most challenging would have to be what I'm doing right now, which I can't really talk about, but I think some of the sequences that you'll start to see when season 3 airs, I think just the technical aspects of trying to make everything work, and you know, I think, yeah, it's mainly the water and the sails and the ships and the environments and trying to make everything look seamless. I think the technical challenges that come with that are probably some of the hardest that we deal with on a day-to-day basis. But some of the fun stuff, I would say for sure, is just working with the crew, the artists. They bring to the table like I've never seen before. We try and have an open environment in the studio. We try and have, the artists have just as much feedback as the supervisors, and we find that we get a lot of great ideas that way. And I think that's probably the most fun I have is in those, meetings and daily sessions, hashing out how we're going to involve this and make it look even better than we could imagine. And of course, set is always fun. It's always fun to be on set and working with the crew. They're absolutely spectacular here in Dublin.
Okay, so Vikings is the first television show that you've worked on after you've done a couple dozen films. So why the switch, and how has television surprised you?
Well, I started in television. We just got the opportunity to work on Vikings, and the script just appealed to me. Michael Hurst is an amazing writer, and both Dennis Berardi and everyone else at Mr. X just thought that this would be a great opportunity to jump over to television. And for sure, television's a completely different beast compared to feature film, just because of schedule. You got 3 weeks to deliver an episode versus you're working 6 months to a year on a feature. So I think we learned a lot. We figured out ways to be efficient, but yet produce film-level visual effects. And for me and for the crew working on it, I think we all enjoy it. It gives us a sense of closure after we finish an episode, and it's enjoyable.
Okay, so you were promoted in the second season to Visual Effects Supervisor, which is the first time that you've held that role. So how have your duties varied versus your past jobs?
Duties didn't vary too much, actually. I spent a bit more time in season 2 on set versus season 1, but the duties within the studio pretty much stayed the same. I worked on the daily sessions, looking at artists' work and critiquing it and trying to get the best possible result. The only difference is that Dennis Berardi was a visual effects supervisor, and everything would get finalized and approved by him, while the second year everything got approved by myself, and then it went off to the producers Sheila Hawk and Bill Goddard and Bill Halliday for approval. So there wasn't a big change within the studio environment. It was more of a change dealing with the clients on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, can you walk me a bit more through how you work on an episode? Like, do you start designing before shooting, or do you have to wait until it's done, and are you ever on set?
Yeah, I spend usually the first month. We have about a month prep schedule prior to shooting the first episode, and basically during that time, anything happening within the first half of the season gets built by art department. They create the blueprints for stuff that we need to do, as well as stuff that they need to do, and we spend that time figuring out what we need to start building within that prep cycle. And usually, after we finish shooting episode 4 is when post-production starts, and we'll spend the rest of the time developing, creating the assets, and evolving what we know is going to be coming down the pipe. Of course, we can interpret what they're going to shoot later on, so as we progress through the episodes, in the case now from 5 until 10, we'll get blueprints ahead of time from our department and work in conjunction while they're shooting before the edit gets handed over to us.
So Gold Derby has interviewed many actors, including 3 from your show, as well as people like Michael Hurst that you mentioned. But I think you're actually our first visual effects supervisor interview. So what's the biggest misconception about what you do?
Good question. I think visual effects, there's 2 primary ones. You have your Game of Thrones visual effects, which have the dragons and castles and everything else that you wouldn't expect to see in real life. While stuff like Vikings, we try and achieve invisible effects, which is mainly enhancing environments. And we've had a lot of people compliment us saying, we've done incredible work working in Norway, when in actuality we're shooting in Dublin. And we spend that time trying to evolve the mountain ranges and the hills that are here to look like fjords. And most of the time for stuff like, we have 6 practical ships that can basically sail into and be rowed into Kattegat. But beyond that, everything else that we have, if we have to put 12 ships or 20 ships or 100 ships, we have to add those in. And we try and make it as seamless as possible so that the audience has no idea that they're there in the first place.
A few years ago at the Emmys, they split the visual effects category into 2. Previously, you talked about how they're more effects-driven shows, and then shows like yours that have effects in supporting roles. Now they're in 2 categories, even though supporting role shows had won the Emmy in the past. For example, Boardwalk Empire over Game of Thrones just a few years ago. So, do you agree with the change?
Yeah, I agree with the change. I think, some of the people that are in the supporting category, like The Walking Dead, Vikings, Mob City, and who else is on that list? Da Vinci's Demon. Yeah, and Black Sails as well. Their budgets, I think, are substantially lower than an HBO show like Game of Thrones. Maybe even Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. I'm not really sure what their budgets are like, but I think splitting the categories is a fair way, because shows that have an unlimited resource, not unlimited, but a large resource pool to grab from, their visual effects are going to be more substantial, not in quality and how good it looks like, but just the amount that they can produce within a single episode. While a show like Vikings doesn't have that deep pocket. And I think splitting the shows from primary to supporting allows a more fair game, where shows that don't have the big budgets can still get a nomination, can still get an award for the great work that they produce.
You're also quite a photographer, so I'm wondering, do you ever want to do cinematography, or how did you come to be in the visual effects portion of the industry?
I've always been a fan of lighting and how it works, and I spent quite a bit of my career lighting on features and commercials. And I think that just through the years, it's just a natural evolution to head from being a lighting technical director, lighting supervisor, and a comp guy to just blend into being a visual effects supervisor. So I think it was just kind of a natural course of evolution, I guess you could say.
What do you find has changed the most since you started, or
4 or 5 years ago, we might have spent 6 hours on a single object rendering it, or 5 hours, and now we're getting to the point where we can render an entire city within 5 hours. So I think I think 5 or 10 years down the road, it's going to get to the point where we're going to be able to do more cycles and produce better results with the computing power that we have and the render engines and packages that we use.
Thanks very much for speaking to Gold Derby. We look forward to the 3rd season, and good luck at the Emmys.